quorum?
Yeah, we have quorum.
Okay. With the presence of quorum, will the meeting of the Oahu Real Property Tax Advisory Commission 2019 please come to order? I would like to welcome all of those in the audience. Welcome. Persons wishing to present oral testimony, if you have not already submitted your registration form to my commission aide, please do so now. Otherwise, please raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak at the time I call for additional speakers, following the testimonies of registered speakers. Each speaker is limited to a 3-minute presentation on all items. Each speaker may testify for him, herself, and may not speak on another's behalf. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, may be posted by the city clerk and available to the public on the city's DocuShare website. As a courtesy, please put all your cell phones on vibrate mode or turn them off during the meeting. Our commission is being recorded in an audio-only format. To increase the accuracy of the digital minutes, I request that commissioners identify themselves before speaking. Thank you. So the commission will now take testimony on all the items on the agenda. We will call on testifiers in the order in which your name was submitted. If you have not yet signed up, please do so now. Sign-up forms are on the table as you entered. When your name is called, please approach the testifier's table, state your name and the item on which you are testifying, and whether you support, oppose, or have comments on the measure. You will have 3 minutes in which to speak. The first speaker is Diane Chong. Diane, would you come forward, please? Please state your name and offer your testimony.
Hi, my name is Diane Chong. I'm here because of the property tax, the residential A, and I'm opposed it. Is there anything else you need me?
Oh, and would you like to elaborate on
Yes,
your
okay.
position? Thank you.
So I lived with my parents before in Manoa. And so when I was going to buy a property, I bought one in Manoa. And this was back in 2005, not knowing that this property tax was going to come about. Before the property tax has increased, in 2013, I was paying $4,115. And then after, in 2014, when you started the increase, if anything was over $1 million, it went up to $7,443. And it has gone up 2016, $9,616. And now this year, I'm paying $10,330. This is a property, it's a 10,000 square foot lot with 2 houses on there. And I know every time when this was brought up, we're only going to tax the millionaires. Okay, I'm not a millionaire. I work for the federal government. It just so happened that I have a property that's worth over $1 million. I've been working for the federal government for 18 years and probably will be working another 10 years there. I'm not going to get rich. And when this property tax went into, I think, 2013, I was just barely making it, paying off the mortgage and paying all of my, utilities and everything like that. And then this property tax came in, and it double whammied me. I had to raise my tenants' rent because I couldn't afford it. And as of now, $10,000, it has gone up from $4,000 to $10,000. $6,000 more. And the thing about it is that it's all on me to pay for this because that's my property. I have another property in Makiki. It's a duplex, and I own it with my brother. So I own one side, and he owns the other side. We have different addresses, yet they, for some reason, the city makes it one property, so I'm paying, again, that double whammy of property tax, even though I only own half of it. And we have one, mine is one address and his is another address. The reason why I'm bringing this up is my dad has an apartment building. It's worth the same amount as my Manoa property. He has 10 units on that property, and he's only paying $5,000 this year for his property tax. I don't understand why you're zeroing in on houses compared to apartments. And it just made, when I found out how much my dad was paying, I wanted to cry, because his property is also worth over $1 million, and it's worth about the same, and yet he's not paying any more than he has to. My uncle owns another apartment building, $5 million property, and he's only paying $20,000 in property tax, and I'm paying $10,000. How is that possible? I think if you're going to go after people, and if you want, you're saying that you're going after the foreign investors. I'm not a foreign investor. And I have a feeling that I'm not the only one who's in this boat. One thing I remember when the council members increased it, they said, oh, well, maybe we should up the threshold of $1 million. I don't want that, because I want everybody else to feel the pain that I'm feeling right now, because I know for a fact property around Oahu is going up in value. I know Makiki is already over $1 million. It's just so happened Manoa was one of the first ones to do that. As I said, I'm not a millionaire. I just happen to have a property that's worth over $1 million. And believe me, if I had known this was going to happen, I would not have bought into Manoa. I would have gone into Kaimuki or even in Makiki area, just so that I wouldn't be taxed as much as I am now. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to. No, that's pretty much it. $10,000 is a lot. My son owed some money to me, and I literally had to go into his account to take out some of that money because I couldn't pay for it. $5,000 is a lot to pay. It's almost, $800 a month I'm paying in property tax. And that's just because my house happens to be in Manoa. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chong. Commissioners, any questions for the testifier? Yes, Commissioner Iwasa.
Thank you, Natalie Iwasa. Thank you for coming and sharing your testimony with us. I'm just wondering, would you mind telling us over that span of time, perhaps how many tenants you've had, or how long-term they
I have, my tenants stayed with me long-term. I just had 2 leave. One was for 12 years and another one was for 13 years. I tried to be sensitive to their situation too. I cannot go up because literally it means like I had to raise their rent by $1,000 if I had them paying for it.
Okay,
all the things, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioners? Seeing none, thank you for coming
Thank
down
you very
today
much.
and taking the time to come down and testify. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other testifiers registered? Any other testifiers who have not signed up wishing to testify?
I have a question, if I may.
Please. Please state your name and the nature of your question.
Yeah. My name's Rob Rito. I live in New Oahu. I looked at the agenda for this meeting, and what it says in the meeting, it says one of the first things is discuss agenda items. Okay, nowhere in there, could I find out what the agenda items were? If you look at that notification, and I went online, and I did it for Bill 49 too, I look on there, and the first thing is discussion of agenda items. But nowhere, unless you can point it out to me, does it say what the agenda items are. So I think that you guys ought to be more informative when you put out a notification of what we're actually speaking on. Okay, thank you. That's my
Thank you.
question.
Okay, duly noted. Are there any other testifiers in the audience?
I don't know what the agenda
Okay.
item is.
Yeah. Part of the agenda items is what you'll see in the new business. Okay. So let's move on to the new business then. Commissioners, at the previous meeting, you voted to create 3 special committees, one devoted to valuations, one to classifications and rates, and another to credits and exemptions. The intention is for these subcommittees to gather in between the commission's meetings, consider a set of ideas, and begin to formulate and draft recommendations. The committees were to provide updates of their work at each full commission meeting. So we'll start with reports first, and after we hear from the committees on all the reports, then we'll get into a more detailed discussion. So I'll call on first the Evaluation Committee and any report offered for that committee. Commissioner Iwasa.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Natalie Wasa. Yeah, so I have just, even though our meeting was brief, I do want to go over a few things. On September 4th, I think everybody knows that the council unanimously supported Resolution 19-199, which allows us then to go ahead and discuss valuations as part of our responsibilities. On September 5th, we had a meeting here in this room, and we did briefly discuss valuations and also Bill 49. We didn't get real far in that discussion, however, because Stephen Takara was not able to be at that meeting, so it was pretty brief. We did, however, have a few additional questions that came up, which I did submit to him, and hopefully he'll be able to address those questions at our upcoming meeting. I also wanted to let the commission know that we did try to establish a meeting yesterday, and that didn't work out as planned because of miscommunication. And then we are also still waiting on information that we requested for our initial committee meeting. So that's my report. Thank you.
Can you go over just a little bit, Commissioner Iwasa, the information we're waiting for, just briefly?
Sure. So I had requested the manual, CoreLogic, so that we can take a look at that, the contract with respect to that, and then also a comparison, a 5-year comparison of the valuations by property type, so that we can kind of get an idea of whether there's like some kind of anomaly in this, the transition year. Those are the major pieces of information I had requested.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next is the Classification and Rates Committee. That's Committee Chair Kimura. Your report, Commissioner. Thank you.
The Classifications and Rates Committee met on August 23rd, and we discussed and agreed upon raising the issue of taxing short-term vacation rentals at the hotel and property tax rate. And this is, of course, it's open to discussion, but our justification was that currently legal short-term rental units are required to pay a state transient accommodations tax as well as the general excise tax, but the city and county only has a residential property tax rate that they are required to pay. And so we feel that since it's operating as a business, it should be taxed as a business.
Thank you for your report, Commissioner. Are there any questions from the other commissioners? Thank you. The next committee is Credits and Exemptions, and the committee chair there is Matthew Panez.
Thank you, Chair Matthew Panez. Our committee met on August 23rd as well. We had 2 discussion points during the meeting. We discussed low-income areas and how we could possibly look to help redevelopment of those areas, similar to what's happened with the Opportunity Zone tax credits that were recently passed. We also looked at incentives for affordable or workforce housing and some other options that could be implemented, looking specifically at ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and how the council may help to incentivize from a taxable standpoint the additional development of those units.
Thank you, Commissioner. So now we have the opportunity as a commission to clarify the ideas and proposals to be covered by each of the committees, which will, comprise the majority of our report at the end of our term, hopefully. Are there any issues that seem worthy of the committee's attention that have been part or not been part of each of the committee's analysis? So we'll start with the discussion of the Valuation Committee subject matter.
Thank you.
And may I also call on the Real Property Assessment Administrator, Steve Takara, to be available to answer questions that may arise.
Thank you, Chair. Natalie Wassa. Well, since we didn't have any real in-depth discussions yet, we would like to do that, and we're trying to establish a committee meeting. So if I may have, if Steve would step forward here, I just would like to find out his availability so we can get that scheduled.
There he is.
Good afternoon, Commission
Afternoon.
Chair, Vice Chair, and other commissioners. Stephen Takara, Real Property Assessment Administrator. How can I help?
As I mentioned, I just would like to schedule our committee meeting. So because I hadn't heard from you, so I just wanted to check what's your availability.
I actually have in some of the emails, or one of the emails I mentioned that I kind of wanted to explain my position or address some of the inquiries. So is it okay to address that now?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Okay, just to kind of reset. So I would like to address Resolution 19-199 and the inquiry submitted by the Valuation Committee. My interpretation of Resol 19-199, which amended Resol 17-112, to include review of the valuation methodologies. Valuation methodologies are three approaches to value: market or sales comparison approach, cost approach, and income approach, not specifically the valuation process. The two utilized approaches to value are used by our division as mandated by law, were included in the presentation made during our first commission meeting. I would like to correct a reference I made during a previous meeting. The legislation relating to the income approach was Bill 11, not Bill 12 of 2018. Regarding the income approach, which was discussed earlier and part of, I guess, the Valuation Committee, the cost of computer system modification, expense of city resources, which will likely require additional appraisers, and the definition of the applied income approach are dependent upon the introduced legislation. I am choosing not to answer the submitted inquiries by the Valuation Committee, as I believe this is not the platform to do so. Responses may complicate and jeopardize the defense of current and future Board of Review and Tax Appeal Court cases. If a taxpayer or representative is aggrieved by an assessment, the option to appeal is available. Hearings at the Board of Review and Tax Appeal Court are the appropriate venues of which the valuation process of the subject property can be thoroughly examined. I would like to share with you our efforts of competency and the desire to gain and enhance public trust. Appraiser trainees are required to successfully pass 4 core appraisal classes, a successful score of the State of Hawaii Certified Residential Exam during the progression, then eventually obtain a successful score of the Certified General Appraisal Exam. The trainee could pass the Certified General Exam in lieu of the Certified Residential Exam in this process. The development and the progression of appraiser trainees takes a minimum of 2 years of classes, proper application of appraisal methodologies, and to demonstrate adequate knowledge of pertinent city ordinances to become a permanent city employee as an appraiser. We also have annual continuing education classes, appraisal classes for the entire appraisal staff as well as valuation analysts. So having said that, I don't know where this all fits in, but I don't, depending on what is being brought up or on the agenda of this committee, I don't plan to attend. So thank you for your time and allowing me to explain my position on these matters.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Higashi.
So, Mr. Takara, you were saying that the position of the administration is, despite the council resolution, you will not answer questions for the valuation subcommittee.
Not particularly, like I mentioned, the valuation process, because I believe the proper or more appropriate venue is Board of Review and the Tax Appeal Court, not this platform.
I see. So you believe there's sufficient transparency for the public as to the valuation process, which is really what the mission was. That we're trying to understand what that valuation process is, because it is the core of how property taxes are valued. I mean, property taxes
Correct.
are set.
And that's why I stated the two approaches that we utilize in the presentation. So, when I don't want to complicate or jeopardize proceedings of current and future appeals or tax appeal court or board of review cases by what I say or responses that may arise.
I see.
Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Iwasa.
Thank you, Natalie Iwasa. I can certainly appreciate the fact that there could be questions or comments made that might impact potential hearings that are being held or to be held. However, I think that there are other parts of the valuation process, and maybe that's just a bad word, that we should understand. And I'll give you an example. I hear time and time again of how people think, oh, the house next door sold for X amount and the house down the road sold for X amount and it's much higher than mine, and so my property taxes are going to go up, my assessed value is going to go up. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that because of the model has been changed, that is no longer the case, that you're taking some type of cost, which again was one of our questions, where are these costs coming from, and using that to create or determine the assessed value. I think it's important for not only us, but the council to understand what is being done with respect to the valuations. And it's important for the public to understand, and for them to not even know that the method has changed is not fair to them, in my opinion. So I think that we can work around this issue of not getting into areas that might come up before a board of review and still get some information out and potentially make recommendations to the council. Do you have any comments on that?
Just to kind of address your comment or statement, is that our valuation process or methodology has not changed. I don't know what makes you feel that we changed our methodology. And, okay, so to elaborate as far as the neighbors or disgruntled, I mean, I did mention that the appeal process is available. So if the property owner, taxpayer, or representative feel aggrieved with the assessment, the value, the exemption, anything about the assessment in which they are taxed upon, you have the appeal process. The appeal process allows for that examination of the assessment. I mean, our office is, you can call our appraisers and you can talk to appraisers as far as specific subject property or specific property information and the valuation of that subject property.
Yes,
Just
Commissioner.
to follow up on that then, my understanding is that in order to go even before appeals, the valuation difference has to be at least 5%, is that correct?
10%.
It's 10%, and there's also a fee to do that, correct?
A deposit cost of $50 to appeal.
$50, okay. Because I also think that, one more question on that. What is the current backlog?
I don't know, but we've been trying to work with appellants and clearing out year by year. Fortunately, there's hiccups, there's people that's from out of town, so there is a little bit of backlog on both sides, because when there's multiple appeals made by a person, they owning several properties, we try to, group them accordingly, or if they have multiple years and, for whatever reason, out of town or life happens, that, we try to schedule them accordingly. There's been postponement requests and stuff, so I don't have the number with me.
Okay, let me phrase the question differently then. If somebody puts an appeal, I think January 15th or sometime in January is the appeal period. If they put in an application at that time, at what point would they realistically be able to expect to have a hearing on their appeal?
Again, it's a case-by-case situation, but I would like to think most of the appeals submitted from the 2019 assessment has been scheduled or will be scheduled shortly.
Okay, so when you say 2019, is that, what period does that actually cover? So January, the appeals were made in January 2019?
Yeah, so just to kind of give a little bit more background, so the 2019 assessment was sent out December of 2018, and that's for tax year 2019-20. So July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2020.
Okay, so because in the past there has been up to a 2-year backlog on some properties, and while certain landowners like Kamehameha Schools do this kind of thing all the time, individual property owners, first of all, some of them miss the deadline because they're not even really fully aware of the appeal process in the first place. But I think to just kind of make a blanket statement that, oh, we have this appeals process out there is not really fair to those people who are concerned that it's going to cost them money. Oh, I'm not going to get anywhere with it anyway. And for whatever reason, they don't go through with it. So I still stand by my position that there are things that we should discuss, and would hope that you would be able to provide answers and the information we requested. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Anybody else with questions? Oh, I just have a few, Mr. Takara. So is there nothing in the evaluation context that you can share of on a general basis, not having to do with any appeals, that can be shared with the committee? For example, studies that the department or division may have come across as to how many jurisdictions use the income methodology and where Hawaii stands in relation to other jurisdictions, what valuation process is used by Hawaii and other jurisdictions of a general nature, because to the extent that the public can be educated, everyone, not just those in appeals, but to the extent that the public can be educated about the process and methodologies, perhaps a better understanding will lead to, fewer appeals. So to say, there's an appeals process, yes, that's true. But sometimes education and transparency can help to avoid litigation if there's a better understanding of the process. So the question is there nothing that can be shared with the Commission on a general basis relating to concepts of valuation and the process of valuation?
I don't want to say absolute no. Again, it's a case-by-case, question-by-question. I stick to what I said earlier.
So the one specific question that was asked, as I understand it, by the committee was any information on where Hawaii stands on the income methodology compared to other jurisdictions. The division has not had any study.
Can I ask for clarification of that question in writing?
Yeah, we will.
Okay.
We can. Along with any other questions, now that we have your position on that, we can frame our questions to be a little more detailed, and maybe
Sure.
to work with you on the confines of the questions and answers that we would like from the division.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Mr. Takano.
Okay. Any other questions?
So the next next committee is the classification committee. Any discussion on residential A? Any other discussion on residential A? Anything else on, yes, Commissioner?
Yeah, so I've been, full transparency disclosure, I've been against residential A from the very start, even going back to when Mufi Hanneman wanted to get those awful investors, and I do rent. I'm concerned with the current tax rates. If it's over $1 million now, we're at 3 times the regular residential rate. And so I share concerns that the testifier brought up earlier, that landlords are going to have to be increasing their rent, which is going to have a negative impact on the rental market overall. So I actually am wondering if we can look at the possibility of potentially having a home exemption for properties who have renters with year-long leases. And this is just something I totally pulled out of the blue based on something else I saw. And the reason I would like to take a look at this is because then it would also kind of have an impact on potentially what we suggest for short-term rentals, and caps on valuations and that kind of thing. So I'm just putting this out there as something that potentially we could discuss, or the committee could discuss if they're going to have any more meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else? Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Kimura.
Thank you. I just also wanted to bring up that our committee would also like to revisit the tax structure for historic homes and credit unions.
Thank you.
Just to remind,
Commissioner Hibano.
yeah, this is Amy Hirano. I just, in our package, there is the bill that the legislature passed in terms of a tax credit for historic homes, for any improvements, renovations done, which will basically increase the value of the historic home. So the question is, are we going to be looking at, re-looking at what historic homes is supposed, or has been paying, or should be paying? I think the discussion should be forthwith within the commission, and I'm sure we will have testifiers saying why we should or we shouldn't. And I think that should be brought up to the public
Okay.
on an agenda item, specific agenda item.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else? Yes, Commissioner Mente.
Yes. Chair Earl Mente. You know, I had a question on that residential A. We've modified that to go to a 2-tier rate. I believe that was the recommendation of a previous commission, right? Since you were on that previous commission, was there a more specific recommendation as to the rate or the amount? Right now it's million, and I assume it just sounded like million is a good number with no real data to back that up. But was there anything more to the previous commission's recommendation on the tier rate for residential A?
No, I think it was a lot of discussion about the concept itself. And I think there was an interest, of course, in making it revenue neutral.
Right.
And so that's where we had the benefit of the division's input on the numbers in connection with that.
Could we kind of look at what that threshold would be instead of just $1 million? Because it sounds like good, but as I reported last time, I think the Board of Realtors had looked at income, the owner's income, and then they found out that it's moderate income goes up to about 1.5 million before we get into the so-called millionaire group.
Yeah.
So I'll go and try and check to see where they got that information, and so we have actually a source, so that we just don't pick an arbitrary number
Yeah.
like $1 million out.
This is Amy Hirano again. I think that's why Councilwoman Kobayashi has asked us, as the commission, to relook or to discuss again the residential A structure. And I think it should be done within the commission and getting testifiers for and against.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner.
Another comment to add on to that.
Commissioner Iwasa.
Yes, Natalie Wassa, thank you. So the problem is, you know, as I see it, we started out with about 7,000 properties when this classification first came into being, and now we're at about 4,000, so almost double in a short period of time, really. So all this time, our median house value and condo values keep going up. So one of the things I had proposed to City Council a number of times was to have some kind of index, and they couldn't. I had thought, well, maybe the Board of Realtors index, I think that's the one that's usually quoted, and for some reason, I don't recall, that index, they couldn't use that as the index, but there must be something out there, and perhaps our realty people could kind of help with this, some type of index that would allow this threshold to move with the market, because really, as the testifier stated, these are people who are land rich, but not necessarily money in the bank, and they do provide homes for a lot of the people who live here. So I think that's something that we really should be discussing as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair?
Yes.
Earl Mentier. I was going to actually introduce this at our valuation committee because we had some testimony on valuation increases, but I may as well turn this in now for the record. This is I'm going to give each of the commissioners one, and you can pass this over. This is the median sales price now. Source is the Honolulu Board of Realtors Multiple Listing Service. It goes back to January 2001. Just to give you an idea what the median sales prices have been doing since that time. So the average owner out there doesn't really look at the whole market. They just look at their property.
Yeah.
And in the context of look, what is happening to everyone else from this chart, you can see how much back in January 2001 up to just recently, it's gone up threefold, which is a tremendous amount, which you would expect if everything stayed the same, because assessments would follow that the property tax would probably go up threefold too. So just in that context, just so we know that, hey, what is the overall market doing? Again, this is just the median sales price, so only on sales only.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can that be part of the record too?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? I have one. If the committee can consider having 2 tiers for each of the property classifications, since values are going up across the board, and it was thought at one time that a 2-tier structure could be fair for residential A properties, it might be time now, because of the rising assessments, that it be considered for all classifications, and maybe a request to the division for a revenue neutral tiered approach to each of the classifications.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We'll
Thank
take
you.
it up in our committee
Yeah,
meeting.
thank you very much. Okay. Okay, so now we move on to Credits and Exemptions Committee, subject matter. Any discussion on that, please? Do we need more time to formulate questions, or there are no questions? Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah, this is Amy Hirano. I think in our package, there is a proposed bill or resolution about Chinatown in terms of some sort of tax credit, or I think it's negation of any real property tax or something. So I think that can be discussed within your committee and have full disclosure. And I really would like to get more people, public involved. If we could put it on an agenda, specific items on the agenda, so we can get that kind of feedback.
Okay, very
Basically,
good.
we're doing a preliminary for the council.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Any other recommendations, comments,
I just
questions?
have-
Yes?
Natalie Wassa, just a question. You know, we have the credit right now, and the threshold is $60,000 for a combined title holder income. And I was just wondering if you'll be taking a look at that, because I think there's currently a bill that would increase that amount to $65,000, if I'm not mistaken. And this is another area where I've testified on to the council, because when we look at income, if there are certain things in the tax law that if they're not considered properly, then two people who are in the exact same situation as far as what their income is overall, there may be different treatment. And I'm specifically referring to the cafeteria plan for people who take advantage of that with their employers. So just ask that if you're going to be discussing that.
Matthew Panas, yes, we can add that to the agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, concerns for that committee? Okay, hearing none. The next question is, before we move on to the agenda items, any other questions of a general nature regarding the organization, purpose, or functions of the committees? Yes, Commissioner.
Sorry, just one more comment.
Sure.
Just for edification for the public, and in case other commissioners didn't know. You know, we're subject to the Sunshine Law because of the resolution that the City Council put forth. And because the commission is subject to that, when we have 3 members of a committee, the committee is then subject to the Sunshine Law, which is why our committee had to have an agenda published.
Sorry, it's 4.
4.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, 4. Thank you for correcting me. Anyway, so I just brought that up because hopefully we will have a committee meeting, and it does take time to put that together because of this, following the Sunshine Law. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's see.
We just have two or 3 people. We don't have to sunshine it.
Okay, so I'm sure that the subcommittee, the committees will meet prior to our next commission meeting, and we'll all provide reports. And hopefully, if you have questions for the division, that will also be forthcoming as well. Let me make an announcement that the next meeting of the full commission
This commission.
is scheduled for Thursday, October 17 at 1:30 p.m. That's Thursday, October 17, 1:30 p.m. And hopefully we'll have a more detailed and fuller agenda.
But, you know, on our agendas, we should be more specific.
Okay. So are there any other announcements?
Sorry.
Okay, so we're coming to a conclusion now. So I'd like to thank everybody's participation today, commissioners, staff, your help, testifiers, and everyone else. So commissioners, if there are no objections, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.